If you are somebody who struggles with career anxiety, then you are not alone, particularly if you have ADHD. I think a lot of people struggle with career anxiety, but today I want to share some insights that might help alleviate some of that anxiety that you have, either the angst of what career to actually choose, or how to navigate a career when you feel like a failure, or how to successfully move back into the workforce after being out of it for a little while, either due to burnout or raising children or anything like that. Stick around because that is what we're covering today. And if this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Kara McGill. I am an ADHD coach and creator, and I'm here for the busy, ambitious brains who want to get schnizzle done, but often feel very overwhelmed about their careers, myself included. So let's get into it. So we're going to kick this off with a reader question that I recently got. And the reader writes, I just finished university, good for you, and I'm now currently starting to build my career. I would like to know how to start the process and not feel like I'm failing, those are her quotes, along the way. I've been passionate about so many things and I'm scared to make the wrong decision. I also feel like I couldn't be happy in many jobs because I get very overwhelmed and overstimulated easily. So that is the reader question that inspired today's video. But I also want to contrast that with a conversation I've been having with a personal friend of mine who also has ADHD, and she's around my age, and she is trying to re-enter the workforce after being out for several years to raise her kiddos. And also because in her previous roles, she's had a tendency to become intensely involved in the roles, put all of her energy into it, and then burn out. And that has been a cycle that she has dealt with for her entire career. And now she feels the same angst as this young gal does as she starts her career. So I want to parallel those two conversations to illustrate the point that this is not a once in a lifetime situation. Throughout our entire lives, we are going to deal with career angst. Am I doing the right thing? Am I pouring my energy in the right directions? Am I failing? Am I succeeding? Why am I not as far along as this person over here? Or why didn't I get the promotion? All of those things are not something that you're going to deal with at the start of your career and then never deal with again. It will go on until you learn how to manage yourself, your emotions, and your thoughts. And that is what we are going to break down in this video. Now, I have shared my framework for ADHD success in prior videos, but to briefly break it down again, self-awareness, lifestyle design, and energy management. And I will break those down further as we go through this reader question. So let's kick it off with self-awareness, which is really just understanding where we get in our own way in terms of our thoughts and feelings and actions. So as I come back to this reader's question, the first thing I want to call out is that she wants to know how to start the process of career planning and not feel like she's failing along the way. She's been passionate about many things and scared to make the wrong decision. So I want to pause and reflect there, because what I'm seeing is some black and white thinking in terms of how she is perceiving her career. She has a very strong fear of failure, and I assume that is connected to making the wrong decision around a career path. The only wrong decision you can possibly make at this point in your career is to completely ignore whatever is in your heart or whatever feels most interesting to you right now. And what I mean by that is very often our heart is drawn in one direction, but the influences in our life and the things that we have been told about what success is and what failure is don't necessarily align to those interests. So we may ignore what's in our heart and go after what our traditions or cultures or family want us to do because we want to make the people in our lives happy. And we don't really have a good or clear indication of what makes us happy yet. So we go out and try all the things that other people tell us we should do and assume that something's going to stick. But very often it doesn't. And that is where you risk failure, because if you're constantly pushing yourself to do things that you're not interested in, to do things that you're not inclined towards, or that do not match your interests or strengths, you are going to have an uphill battle in that career. And I suspect you're going to feel like you're failing a lot because it feels uncomfortable, it feels unnatural, and it doesn't feel like it's aligned to who you are. So coming back to that fear of failure in terms of your career decisions, you say that there are a lot of things that you're interested in, and I will address being a multipotentialite in a minute. But what I would do if I were you is to start with those interests that you have, because that is a very good indication of where you are going to have a strength. Now, we also know that some of our interests don't have the same staying power as some of our other interests do. The ones where you have strongest interests are the ones that you want to hone in on. Personally, in my life, I have bounced around, done a million different things, but my strongest interests have always been around personal development, psychology, spirituality, yoga, being more productive and a better version of myself. And while my entire professional career had nothing to do with those things, they always stuck around. And now that I'm out of corporate and I'm doing creative work, the work that I want to do, I'm finally seeing success that I had never known was possible and fulfillment and gratification that I never knew was possible for me in the past. So your interests are a good indication of where to start. Stay curious, look at the long-term interests that never seem to wane, and don't assume that you cannot make a career out of those things. Coming back to the reader's question, the one other thing I want to point out about self-awareness is where she writes, I feel like I might not be happy in many jobs because I get overwhelmed and overstimulated very easily. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And if you are somebody who suffers from burnout cycles or feels like you're constantly failing in your career because of your ADHD, I want you to lean in and listen up really closely. Burnout, overwhelm, overstimulation, all of those things are very real. They are internal responses to something happening externally. And very often we think that if we had the right job, we wouldn't feel overwhelmed or overstimulated or burned out because the right job wouldn't trigger those things in us. And nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is that ADHDers struggle to self-regulate. That means that in moments of stress, we are not really good at taking a moment to adjust our nervous system to whatever's going on and behave appropriately. Instead, our nervous systems are wired to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode immediately, which bypasses any possibility for us to take a moment and consider how we might respond to a stressful situation. Instead, we have a bunch of emotional weather that happens inside, and our behavioral response might be to snap at a boss or to run out of the room or to forget doing something really important and drop the ball and then feel like we are a failure. And that whole cycle is very energetically intense, which is why we tend to feel overstimulated and overwhelmed and burned out. So the work for ADHDers is not to find the perfect job because that doesn't exist. Whatever job you have is going to have stressors. It's going to have people that are difficult to work with. It's going to require you to do things that you may not know how to do right away, which can freak you out, or other stressors in your life might impact how you show up at work. So in terms of the reader question, I would invite her to let go of this idea or fear of choosing the wrong profession. Instead, I would encourage that reader to refocus her attention on self-regulation. Both how do I self-regulate every day and what habits do I need to build into my daily practice so that I continue to practice self-regulation? And also, how do I learn to self-regulate in the moment when stressors come up? And that is a separate topic that I will address in a follow-up video. But what I want to underscore right now is that the work this reader needs to do is internal. It has nothing to do with picking the right or wrong job. So with all of that said, now we're going to move into lifestyle design, where we take that self-awareness and apply it to our life so that we can move forward in the right direction. I would recommend starting with getting super clear on what it is you want. I think it's really important to look at all those interests that you have because that is what's going to give you the most staying power, consistency, and emotional resilience. The next step I recommend doing is defining what success and failure looks like. You've put a stake in the ground and you've taken action. You know exactly where you're going and you know what success looks like and you know what failure looks like. That is lifestyle design. Now, the third element here is energy management. And this is so important for ADHDers because very often we start new things and then we just kind of completely forget about them and we never check in with it again. In this context, energy management would be setting up a system or routine to calibrate your progress on a weekly basis. I've talked about this before, but every Friday I have a standing appointment on my calendar to do a weekly review for everything I've done in my business and in my personal life. This is where I check in to see how are things going, what drained me this week, what lit me up this week, what am I excited about, where am I overcommitted, what do I look forward to, and what do I no longer want to do. And this process is where the magic happens, especially if you have an ongoing fear of making the wrong decision, because that process of weekly check-ins is going to help you understand the nuance of whatever it is you're going after, rather than assuming you're going to be able to make this big life decision and it's either going to be the right decision or the wrong one. And if you want to change directions, then great. At least you have the context that you've tried something, you have met some level of success, unless you never got started, and that's the only way you could possibly fail. And you've calibrated your energy along the way, so you're very confident as to whether or not you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Having a framework to help you navigate that process is priceless, and it will help you live your life with intention. Now, before I wrap up, I wanted to address the multipotentialite piece because I know that is a huge issue for ADHDers. I recently came across this theory. It's called the Hick-Hyman law, and it's named after the two psychologists that came up with it. And basically, it suggests that the amount of time it takes for us to decide something is directly correlated to the amount of decisions that we have. Now, when you put that in the context of career possibilities, it's no wonder that any one of us would become overwhelmed at the multitude of possibilities that we have today for careers. Basically, anybody with the time, the willingness, and an internet connection can completely change their life or transform their career. And I'm living proof of that, because that's exactly what I did. So having infinite career possibilities is a wonderful thing because it democratizes success to some degree and gives us more of an even playing field in terms of creating a life for ourselves. But the downside of that, especially if you have ADHD, is that all of those decisions become very overwhelming. And I would assume that a neurotypical might be better at laser focusing on a career direction and going that way. But we don't have laser focus. It's more like a disco ball. And when you have disco ball energy, unless you make the conscious decision to put a stake in the ground and make a decision and go in a direction, then your energy is going to continue to go in 1,000,001 directions. And you will end up going absolutely nowhere, which is why we often feel comparatively like we're not moving forward as everyone else does. It's because our energy is going in so many directions, and it's hard for us to choose something and move forward. One of the greatest skills that we can cultivate is the understanding of what is for us and not for us. And that is why I love that framework so much. It helps to build some structure around the process, but you have to decide a direction and then move forward and take action. And then if it's not the right outcome, then you move to the next action without making it a personal failure along the way. And that is what builds self-trust and gives us the ability to make these hard decisions. And to that end, I'm going to wrap this up with a quote that came from Elizabeth Gilbert, because I think it just illustrates this struggle so beautifully. Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, once shared an exchange that she had with someone who was struggling to become a career writer. Elizabeth asked her, "What are you willing to give up in order to have the life you keep saying you want?" And the writer said to her, "Oh, you're right. I need to start saying no to the things that I don't want to do." And Elizabeth then dropped the real truth bomb. She said, "No, it's much harder than that. You need to learn to start saying no to the things you do want with the recognition that you only have one life and you don't have all the time and energy for everything else." So I'm going to wrap this up by leaving you with that simple question. What are you willing to say no to in order to live the life you want to live? I hope this was helpful, guys. Thanks for listening to the end, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.